Welcome to R28 Common Ground. My name is Harry. If you guys don't know, I'm one of the staffers here for R28, and it's really good. It's really good seeing all of you guys again. I don't know if you guys know, but R28, we've been out for the past 2 weeks. Our church had a campus-wide event, and we weren't able to see each other for the past 2 weeks. And it's good to finally be back again, and we're going to be able to meet on Friday and so on. So welcome back. Tonight, we actually have a very special kind of event planned tonight. So last week, our church, we had a marriage conference. And I think for a lot of us here, for collegians here, because of the cost, it was kind of hard for us to go to the event. I know some of you guys really wanted to go, but timing-wise, it didn't work out. So as an R28, we decided, hey, why not have our kind of marriage conference or like a dating conference just for our collegians here tonight. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. So we're going to have, we have awesome panelists. Tonight I'm just going to be emceeing. I'm just going to kind of moderate the event. But we have awesome staff members. They're actually staff members in R28. So it's, yeah. Now, I know our church hired Gary Thomas to come and speak for us, but we got actual staff members here. So we actually have a relationship. Some of them are your cell group members. So it's going to be great to relate on this content. And I think for a lot of us here, we have these questions about dating. And again, tonight we're going to specifically focus on dating. How many of you guys how many of you guys are single? Are in a relationship right now. Wow! Okay, so we got a good balance. How many of you guys are married? Yeah! Okay, we only got a few. Yeah. So tonight we want to cover kind of like a big spectrum. Now we put up on our R28 site on Facebook, Google Doc, where we asked you guys to ask us a bunch of questions. And to be very honest with you, we got so many questions, and these questions were not just like, oh, you know, how does a good relationship look like? It was actually very in-depth. It was very, I mean, we were all blown away by the questions that you guys all answered in. And we're actually answering those questions tonight. We may not get through everything, so sorry about that, but we want to cover a majority of the questions that you guys submitted. So yeah, let's get started. So if I could have the panelists come up here. Let's get right. These are your panelists for tonight, and these are the people that are going to be answering your questions. So I see a lot of new faces here too. So we're going to take this time to kind of go around and introduce ourselves. So all the panelists, if you guys can kind of go around, introduce your name, your age, and what stage you are in your life right now. So you can start.
My name is Ben. I am 26. And the stage in my life is engaged.
So that's beautiful woman right
here. I'm Margie. I'm 26, and I am engaged to my best friend Ben.
Hi, I'm Roman. I'm 28 and currently I'm single.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm 22 and I am single. I am 29 and have been married for 3 years.
What up, R28? Hey, my name is Jay Doe. I'm a young 47. and I'm married.
I'm Bane. I'm 32 years old. I've been married a little over 8 years.
And my name's Harry. I'm 24, and I'm in a relationship. So these are your panelists for tonight, and it's going to be an awesome night where we're going to just answer all these questions. Now, again, I want to remind you that these questions are straight from you, from our audience, from you guys. It's not questions that we came up with. None of these questions we came up with. We looked at it and we were blown away. And tonight we're going to be answering these questions, but I want to let you guys know some of these questions, it's very hard and difficult to answer. And I think for a lot of us here, we might have an answer, but that might not be the right answer. Depending on the situation that you're in, depending on current circumstances, name it. There's so many different avenues and ways that we can answer this question. But tonight, we want to share from our experience, or the panelists want to share from their experience, exactly how they dealt with certain things, certain topics that you guys brought up. So are you guys ready? Oh my goodness, are you guys ready? Alright, so let's get started. So the main topic in terms of dating, I think all of us have this question of, what's the purpose of dating? I think we have to start from there. We know the word date, we know the word relationship, what does that mean? So I guess I just wanted to open up to our panelists here at our first question, and they're pretty nervous, so just show them a lot of grace. But because we are in a church context, because we want to be living a missional Christian life, what does a biblical relationship look like? Or what's the mindset of having, or a biblical mindset to have when entering into a dating relationship? So if anyone has any thoughts or comments to that, get started.
Sweet.
There you go.
Okay, so maybe I'll strike first really quickly, just because I think this is highly conceptual and abstract. So, dating is tricky. You know why it's so tricky? It's because it's not in the Bible. If you want to date biblically, you should just get arranged marriage. Because in the Bible times, that's how they did it. In fact, throughout most of human history, it was arranged marriage. Dating is actually a relatively newer concept in human history. I could be wrong here, but like in the 1920s, the roaring 20s, you know what dating was? Dating was a man taking a woman out to dinner with the understanding that she was going to return some type of sexual favor. So if you, like the word dating, the roots of that word in America is actually borderline like prostitution. And the reason why it's so tricky is because it's culturally, there's so much baggage. Biblically, it's absent. There's no concept of dating. In the Bible, you have love your neighbor, and so then you have friendship, and you have marriage. And so dating is like this weird, like cultural baggage-filled middle ground period where you're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. And as you get to know them, you like them, you guys like each other, you guys have physical hots for each other, but you can't have the privileges of marriage. And so it becomes this really tricky ground where I feel like you have to walk this tension of trying to love your neighbor without knowing that you are married to that person. So, for example, is it okay to just date for fun? That's where I think it gets tricky, because the sliding scale would say, well, not quite. You're going to be headed in one direction. You're always a neighbor to one. But it seems like there's no just middle ground where you just get the benefits without commitment. So maybe anyone want to chip in? So basically what I was saying is...
Well, I think I just wanted to say, for clarity purposes, to each their own, but as a girl, I wouldn't want to just be dated around, if that makes sense. So if you're a guy, you should let me know, and I'll probably say no. You know what I mean? It's like, you should be clear. Because for me, I think dating was for the intent on marriage. And I guess this analogy would be like when you're going on a test drive for a car. Like, yeah, necessarily you don't have to buy it, but then why would you go to the dealership and test drive a car if you don't plan on purchasing one, or if you don't need one? What are you going for?
So can I ask you a quick question about that? Because I think that's where it gets tricky though, because, so you don't, I love the test driving imagery. Sometimes I would actually do it just for fun, but so I guess what I want to ask is, like, you date with the intention to marry, but you're not married to that person. And I think for a lot of us, and one of the things that I experienced growing up, and I admit, like I dated, you know, the girls, and I think that was always a big struggle. And I wonder if that's a struggle for some of us here, is that in our dating relationships, it feels more than dating sometimes. We feel like we're married. We've crossed that boundary. But when we just treat it as a dating relationship, we feel like we want commitment. So, like, do you have any insight for us in terms of how to speak into that tension? Like, is that tension okay? Like, should that tension be resolved? Should that tension, like, is that something that we're just supposed to have to deal with in the context of dating? Or, you know, I guess I'm going more experientially.
I would not be a good example because before Paul and I even went on our first date, I said that I knew we were going to get married. So I'm not a good example, and there's like no explanation. But maybe that's why I didn't date until I did, because my commitment was dating is equivalent to marriage. And so maybe that's why I didn't date. I'm not saying that was the best way, or I would recommend it, but that was my experience. But if anyone else could speak into that, because I'm not a good example.
Well, I think for Margie and I, we're engaged, and so there is that tension. Like, there is the tension of like almost, we're almost there. Like, she got the ring. Like, we're about to do this. Like, you know? And I think, yeah, it really comes down to like, how are we honoring God, you know, in our relationship? Even though we've made this commitment to each other, even though we've, you know, I put a ring on it, so I'm pretty committed, right? Like, but going, even before we were engaged, you know, I think there were some things that we had talked about, we had set expectations, and, you know, I straight up told her, I was like, I'm not trying to play around, girl, like, I'm trying to, you know, do this for the long run. And she was like, cool, you know? But yeah, I think that tension is there because there's the temptation of wanting to be, you know, somewhere that you're not there yet, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, I think that in those times you really have to remember that you're first, you know, a child of God, and that you're wanting to honor Him in dating. You're going to want to honor Him in the relationship. So, yeah.
Let's backtrack a little bit. I mean, this is great. But I think for us, I mean, even for me, like, when we were first getting into a relationship, like, what does a date look like? Or, you know, even the question of, again, this whole commitment. Do we have to commit when we go on a date with someone? We hear this term a lot, like, oh, I can go on many different dates and get to know people. So is it the idea to get to know people? Or is it really for the idea of commitment? And to, because some of us, we might not even know if we want to marry this person. And maybe we might be going on a date. But, you know, I guess in light of that, what should we do from there? You know, how does it even look like? You know, like Jenny said, like, do we tell them, like, hey, I'm here to get married? Or is it simply like, hey, I want to get to know you? So I think that's something that can be clarified.
Okay. So I think it's two separate ideas of going into like a first date and saying, I want to know, like, I think the last part of the question was date with the intention of seeing what person I like. I think that's very different than meeting someone and saying, I want to know more about this person. And I think before you go into even like that first date, you should know. I think the second part is the value. Like, what is it okay to go date other people and like date around to see what I value in a person? But I think that should come from the Bible. I don't think that that's necessarily from the people that you date and the experiences that you have. And I think that going into any kind of date or relationship, I think if you have that knowledge of what it means to be a biblical man or a woman, can give you a really good biblical mindset to have when entering dating in general too.
Yeah, I want to add on to that because maybe some of you are like me and you're not able to learn something about yourself or others just in theory or reading it from the Bible or reading it from a text. I'm a kinesthetic learner, right? I like to experience things as I go, and that's kind of what gives me information. But at the same time, I agree with drawing this line of not dating someone just to figure out what you like or just to figure out what values are important to you. I think we can do that to a very healthy extent with friendships. I think you could do that with getting to know a group of people. It might not be the fastest way, quote unquote, but I think it's the wiser way. When you're in a one-on-one exclusive kind of relationship or whatever you want to call it, a lot of emotions can be added, a lot of vulnerability, which can make things a little bit skewed and subjective. And it's hard to see from, is this what I really value, or is this just a felt need? That I just happen to feel a little bit more lonely in this time, I just want more companionship, and this person fills that longing, and we confuse those things. So even if you are experiential like I am, I would say in agreement that you shouldn't go on these dates just to figure out what do I like. Because there are better ways to do
that. Just to add one small note, that I think you can make a clear distinction between a date and dating, right? Because when you say dating, it feels like you're committed. You have to kind of commit to a certain level. But if it's just a date, where it's just almost like a neutral ground where you're getting to know one another, it changes the dynamics a little bit. And as Christians, we should treat, I think it's, get the passage, we should treat each, 1 Timothy 5. We should, young men, treat each person as your brother, sisters with all purity, right? So dating, you can actually get to know people just by dating. You don't have to actually start right away with this commitment.
So, already, look, there's a lot, and I'm pretty sure you guys feel overwhelmed. But if you have all these questions like stirring up in your head right now, just hold on to them, and then during our cell group time, we'll be able to share all those different questions. But I think we got a good handful of just what dating is, and just how to distinguish between a date and what it means to be dating. Now, here's a big thing in college. We're going to transition over. How many of you guys have heard the term, no, like hope, rope, and what is it called? Is it no, rope? Yeah, scope and rope. Okay. So the main idea of this is, am I ready to date? And I think this is a question that we all have. Am I like spiritually ready? Am I physically ready? Am I mentally ready? Am I just simply ready? So I guess to the panelists, the first question is, when do you know, when you're ready to date? And how do you know?
Okay, so I think there's a couple of things that I think about when I hear the word ready. And I'm going to say this one thing first. To be honest, I don't think you're ever, if you're thinking okay, I go to church every Sunday, check. Oh, I got good biceps, check. If you're going through this list and you're trying to meet an expectation or an image of yourself, that's not the route. Because what's going to happen is you're going to think you're ready for something, for a relationship, and you're going to go in and find out that, dude, I'm arguing, I'm fighting, what happened? I thought I was ready, right? And so, to be honest, you're never ready. Because throughout life, you're changing as a person. You're going through different experiences. You're walking with God, right? And I think that you'll change, and you're changing, and then someone else is changing too. So you can only imagine how complicated it gets, right? But I think that, yeah, being ready, like, one thing that I can say about when it would be a good time to even consider dating is really finding your identity in Christ and knowing that your identity is not in a relationship or what you think you need, because you need Jesus. And so that's like the one thing, because if you go into a relationship and you're just like, you know, like a marriage, being with someone is gonna complete me. And I think our culture is very like that, right? Like, oh man, like, you're my one and only, like, ooh, like, I love you, and you know, you like complete me, and it's the culture is spitting this out at us, but really, that person is Jesus. And you know, if you put your hope in the relationship, you know, there's gonna be times when you guys argue that you're gonna feel like that fails. And I think that's where a lot of times people get so hurt. People, get heartbroken, breakups happen. But yeah, ready, I feel like is a very great term. But yeah.
To add on to that though, I think there are some cases where you may not be ready to date. And I think a lot of it is stemmed from, are you trying to find this void from someone else when you should be going to the Lord? So if you find yourself feeling lonely, if you find yourself needing someone to rely on, and a boy or a girl finally comes into your life and you're like, God, thank you. Like, you finally given me this person that I can cry to, I can, you know, just like like do things with. But in reality, when you should be doing those things with the Lord, I think that's when you should know you're not ready to date. If you want to look for Jesus in someone else, like if you want to look for a savior in someone else.
Yeah, and I totally agree with them. The one thing I would add though is, it's one thing to feel like you're never ready to date, but it's another thing to be ready yourself. Like, am I ready is a descriptor. Readying, it's proactive, it's a verb. You know what's interesting is, like, in Genesis, before God gave Adam and Eve, God gave him a purpose, he gave him a calling, he gave him responsibility. What's fascinating is he gave him a responsibility before a woman. In our culture, we want to flip that around. We want a woman, and then eventually, we want her to help us, and I'm talking to the guys, help us find a calling and fulfill our responsibilities. So in terms of like, are you ready? I don't know. But in terms of you readying yourself, specifically for the guys, like if you are not walking into your responsibilities, like your classroom responsibilities, your responsibilities as a son, as a sibling, as a part-time job employee, as a church member, if you're not walking into those responsibilities well, you're not readying yourself for a relationship.
Yeah, I really like everything that's being shared, so many thoughts, trying to distill it to something simpler. But yeah, I think you're never ready, I agree. But there are also practical things to look at, whereas your relationship with God, I think that's the key. But there are also, I think, even smaller logistical details. If you look at your everyday schedule, right, full-time college student working maybe part-time jobs, helping out in a family business, it might not be the best season for you right now, for what you can handle as an emotional capacity, what you can handle in your time management, and that's okay too. Another thing that came to mind as Ben was talking about Genesis and this idea of mission and purpose, and I mean, feel free to push back, especially for the married folks, but I think that if marriage is your chief purpose in your life, you've missed the mark. And here's why. When Jesus comes back and we're with him in heaven, right, new kingdom and a new earth forever, everything's perfect, there's no sin. What's not there? Marriage. No one will be married in eternity. And if that was something that was supposed to be, I think, a consummative final end to mankind's purpose, then it would have been there. Right? And I think it's really important, and this goes with identity and purpose, to know what we're called to do. And yes, marriage can be a part of that journey, but it shouldn't be the end goal of who we are as people.
I just want to like add on to this definition of ready and ready. You can be ready. That doesn't mean as soon as you're ready, your partner is going to come into your life. And I think that was my experience, is that I had a sense of readiness as I grew older and in my maturity, but that didn't mean that the person I was interested in me, or the person that was interested in me. You know what I mean? Just because you're ready, that doesn't mean. And so, in terms of like a good season and bad season, my personal experience was Paul came into my life, I think, at a really bad season. I had graduated from college, I moved back home, I didn't know what I wanted to do, I was unemployed, I just started coming out to Living Hope, and so if you even ask Paul, like, he got a lot of rejections before I even said yes, and because I didn't think I was ready. Like, it was not a good time. Like, in my life, the last thing I need is a relationship. But he persevered, and what I found was, that he really was a godsend, and God's grace and kindness to me that I experienced. And it was in this bad season for both of us, actually, where I kind of saw him, and I could see him as like a potential partner, because he was there for the back, and he did really well. And so it wasn't the honeymoon stage. Actually, we entered into a very like the worst season, but yeah.
I had a quick illustration to that because I think that's a great point. How many of you guys watched the movie La La Land? Right? That movie, if you think about it, well, I won't ruin it. I won't make it wrong. Well, it's a great illustration, so I'm going to say it anyway. That movie is a great depiction of timing in relationships, right? With the two protagonists, with Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone's character. When there was a point when they're dating and Ryan's career is taking off as a musician or whatever it was, and because of that, he chose his career over the relationship. So they drifted apart. But later on, to get back together, what's happening then is Emma Stone's character, her career starts launching, right? And so things fall apart. Eventually, they don't get married, right? And I think that speaks into, sorry. But it's the reality of, because I don't want anyone in here thinking, am I single because I'm just not ready enough, or I'm just not good enough, or something like that. And as for someone who's single I'm still single now, those are thoughts that I have to wrestle with through the years. But I think that movie really depicts the reality of timing. A lot of it's just timing. And it's okay too, and God's sovereign over that.
So I guess persevere. No, I'm just kidding. No, but I think, so what I've been getting from this is that maybe the question might not be, am I ready? Maybe that might not be the right question to ask yourself, am I ready? Then I guess for all of you guys, then what are some practical questions that we can ask to ourselves in terms of, okay, if ready is not the right question, then in terms of, I guess, if people are telling me one thing, like, hey, not today, not today, not today, how do I even question that? So I guess, what are some questions that we can ask? Other than asking ourselves, hey, am I ready today?
How about, am I willing to give?
Wow.
I don't have anything else. No, okay, maybe I'll quickly unpack it while someone thinks. The reason why is because our default position when we enter into a friendship, relationship, is what can I get out of this relationship? And I think that often plants seeds for destruction later down the road. But I think when we enter into a relationship, or our disposition is, how can I be outpouring? I think maybe that's a better question. Maybe that's a better heart check for us.
I think a question that, I don't want to say we, because I don't think I should ask that question. But I think a good question to ask yourself before when you're thinking about whether you're ready or not is, how would your spiritual walk with Christ benefit the other person? And if it does or if it
doesn't. I kind of forgot what it was like today. It was so long ago.
How many years?
1995, so I've been married almost 20 years, but it was like 22 years ago. So That's why I told Steve, hey, I'm useless here. I forgot everything. But one thing I remember though is, man, it was confusing. When I was in college, especially around your age, it was confusing. You know, there was no model at that time to kind of follow. It was just, you're on your own, kind of do your thing. But I think God sovereignly kind of helped me kind of wait a little bit, because there were a lot of issues, like not just spiritual, but I think emotional. There was a lot of areas that I needed to develop. And so I think when I actually started dating about 26, 24, kind of got me a little more ready. But I think we should have a holistic approach to our maturity, not just spiritually, but like, are you mature emotionally? You have some like really good, how are you in terms of your character, your integrity, things like that. So I think, if I could talk to my old self, or young self, I would say, hey, really, get a good idea of what are some issues that you need to kind of improve.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, do you have one more?
I think a question to ask is, are you willing to lay down your pride? And one thing I will tell everybody here, you don't know how prideful you are until you are in a relationship with someone else. There are so many times when Margie and I are in the car, and if you guys ever see us in the car and we're both like our arms on the window like this, and we're both looking away like this, we're waiting for someone to say sorry. And like I want you to just hear what I just said. Like, we're waiting for someone else to say sorry. But the whole process of that is, that's pride, right? And so, are you willing to put your pride down to be the one to say sorry? And that's like, dude, it's kind of uphill battle, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these are all great questions. And, one, we talked about what does dating look like? And then second, we talked about, are we even ready today? And what kind of questions should we ask? And then the biggest thing, I think the next question is this, who do we date? Who are we looking for? And, I think this kind of goes two ways. I think there's two sides here. Number one, I see a side where you're playing the advocate of, hey, you shouldn't date this person, or hey, you should date this person. And there's another side of you saying, oh, should I date this person? What do I do? So I think this is a question I think this is great for all who are married, who's engaged, who's single. We have all, this world tells us, oh, you gotta look for this guy or this girl who looks like this or who acts like this. Is that biblical? And number two, what should we do in terms of us giving advice to people, and even us giving ourselves those answers in terms of looking for someone?
In terms of the first question that you said about the looking for characteristics, the Bible doesn't really say this is the type of person you need to marry, but the Bible says this is the type of person you should be when you get married. So it doesn't talk about the one, but it talks about you becoming the one. And it doesn't talk about one person, it doesn't talk about a soulmate, but you find the one when you marry the one. You don't meet someone and you don't question, are they the one? It's never like that, but I think society has made us to believe that there's the perfect person out there who is gonna have biceps and who is gonna, I forget what you said, and we always think that there is that perfect person out there, but there's not, honestly. And so I think you are ready to, or wait, what's the thing? Oh, you know who to date when you don't really, I don't think that's something you need to focus on, but what you need to focus on really is your heart first. If you look for the perfect person, I'm sorry, you're gonna take that perfect person. Just like how Bane says there's no perfect church, and if you go, you're gonna mess up the church. If you find the perfect person, if you go releasing your needs to them, you're gonna make them the imperfect person now.
Let's pray.
I agree. I think those are great points. At the same time, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? Sorry, that's an old euphemism.
Could you
Yeah, I don't want to explain the euphemism, I'll just go to my point. Right? Which is, you don't want to just blindly say that, oh, we're all imperfect sinners, right? So let's just go into this thing. I think there's a lot of wisdom to be said of knowing yourself and knowing what's more or what's less compatible with you, right? Knowing your love language, right? That could be a practical checklist. Knowing where your needs are, what you're looking for in that stage of dating, right? When I was in college and I was thinking about dating, what I wanted from a significant other is very different from what I want now. Because I've changed over those years, and so will you, right? It's good to know yourself in that way. And so there's little practical things, right? You can look at like, well, would I do a long distance relationship, or would I not? That's something very practical, right? How often would I want to communicate with this person? Things like that.
Just to kind of add off of that, I think one thing I thought about a lot with, the whole who to date is, I think we have to be really careful with how we take in social media. And I think a lot of times we see, we see people in a relationship status, or, we see Instagrams of people like doing awesome things together, and we sometimes go like, oh man, that's what I want. And I think that puts you in a really dangerous spot, because you're starting to build these expectations for someone else who's gonna have to come into your life and meet this. And I think a question that you can ask yourself is like, could I meet these expectations? Like for myself, if I were to date myself, could I meet these expectations that I'm setting? And so, I would say don't use social media as your standard, and to be very cautious of how social media is changing your mindset.
Now, I think a lot of these questions are very inward focused, so like me. So in terms of, I want to ask the more experienced people. I guess, we hear this, I'm pretty sure you guys give a lot of advice to a lot of students and just to people in terms of like, oh, who you should date, or in terms, maybe that might not even be the right question. Because you hear this a lot, like, oh, this guy, he's been into too many relationships, so you should date this guy. Or, oh, this girl has been in too many relationships, so you should date this girl. Or he's not experienced enough, she's not experienced enough. How do you combat that? How do you discern in terms of, even like for some of us, we might actually give relational advice to our friends, to our families. How do we discern what's the, is that a really good advice to give in terms of like telling them, hey, you don't have experience and you shouldn't date them, so you want to find someone who's more like this? How would you give advice in terms of dating? Who to find?
Honestly, guys, you know what the sad thing is? It's because I work with couples, and so sometimes I sit in front of couples and I'm so mind blown that they're in this relationship and they can't see. To me, it's like it really, like, I'm so flabbergasted of like, can't you see that he's not treating you right? Or like, why would you be in this relationship? But I think the frustrating thing as a therapist is that sometimes they won't listen. They won't change, and so it's like almost like they almost have to kind of walk through it themselves. And so that's my experience when it comes to my friends too. It's like I have like red flags, but whenever I try to share that with them, it doesn't wash over them. It becomes like and now it's like me and him against the world kind of mentality, and so I can't connect with them. And so I would ask them, like, why do you like him? Instead of telling them that this person may not be the person that's good for you. I would say, why do you like him? And like, how does it make you feel? And what's the best date that you've been on? And I would listen to them first. And then, And in terms of like who to date, I think prior to dating, I had all these like expectations of like the type of person that I wanted to be with. But Paul is not the person. Honestly. One example would be, I'm a very serious person. I love to talk. I'm a deep thinker. I love to read. You know, like I could spend hours at a coffee shop just talking about things. And so I was like, I need a man who can converse with me, who can dialogue with me, right? I had this experience where this guy was a really deep thinker. It was so excruciating just to spend time with him. It was like, it felt forced. It was like, get me out of here. This is awkward. And then with Paul, it's like, the one thing I fell in love with is a sense of humor, his lightheartedness. But if you would ask me before, like, what kind of person do you need? I'd be like, I need someone who thinks like me, who, like, is on my level, but in actuality, actually, I need someone who's the opposite of me. Like, I need someone who's funny, lighthearted, and I wouldn't have known that until maybe, going on a date, or seeing him from afar, and, like, laughing, and then realizing, oh, I kind of like being around him. You know what I mean?
Just to piggyback, so I totally agree. So compatibility, you know how it's like, oh, do we have chemistry? Are we compatible? The thing is, sometimes our ideas of who we think we'd be compatible with, it's inaccurate because we lack self-awareness. And so that's where I think surrounding ourselves with people, and sometimes that proper dating period can actually expose and reveal a lot of our compatibility issues. But I think where I would also add is, even more than compatibility, I kind of blogged about this, but I really believe who you should look for, it really boils down also to a values. Because like compatibility, if you just die to yourself, like you can kind of make it work. But values are life pillars. So when someone says like, I value family, like I'm like Thanksgiving, Christmas, we have these traditions, that's a value. But if someone else says, I value career, like I'm all about career, like family's secondary, I'm just saying that's gonna put a lot of friction on that future relationship. Values can change, but with much greater pain than even like interest change. Interest can change fast. Compatibility, it can alter, or reveal itself to be something different. But values, I think that can be really painful. So what are your values? And in the other person, you have to discover what their values are. And then secondly, but you know, the scary thing is like, even values can change over time. So I think one question I would ask is, if you're attracted to someone, I would ask, why are you attracted to that person? For what reasons? Because I think that reveals something about not just that person, but you. So for me, you know, Angela, two things that I was really, I mean, yeah, she loved Jesus and all that stuff, and you know, we served together, but two things that really attracted me about her was, one, she was wicked smart. I've never, like, I was like, I can't even talk to her. Like, she's saying words and I'm like, yeah, I'm like totally faking it. Like, yeah, the endoscopy of the brain, you know? And so she really challenged me. And the second thing was, she was strong. Like, she wasn't afraid to, like, challenge me. She would, like, be like, that something was like, you know? Like, I was like, whoa, this girl's like, whoa. And for some reason, I realized, wow, I like her intelligence. I love her strength. And so what that revealed some of my values. And so, why?
Steve, I can totally relate to you. My wife, I mean, you know, my wife is much smarter than me too, so it's hard. But in terms of value, for me, I just thinking back, one of the values that I really appreciated with my wife was she loved kids. She, you know, literally when you talk about like children and babies, she would start crying. You know, I'm a manly guy inside. I really like children. So at that time, it really had a strong push. Just started it.
Yeah, can I weigh in here? Man, you have a great point. Because I think we have a mix of people here, those of you who are single, those of you who are already in relationships, and from what's being said here, it sounds like a lot of these values were discovered in the relationship process. And so if you're in a relationship, the encouragement would be start discovering these things. But if you're not, if you're single, right, I think you also need to know your values, right? And one of the best ways, I think, is, well, there's two ways. Number one, look at your closest friends in your life. You've picked them for a reason, right? Think about, why is this my best friend? Why do I enjoy spending time with him or her? And that'll kind of give you a little bit of like a mirror into your own self. And then when the question's about who should you date, right? When you look at someone you're interested in, look at their friends, right? Because they're the ones that are going to be speaking into their life. They're the ones that shape and mold them. And try to understand their value system through that. I think that's one way, if you're not in a relationship, you can investigate.
Harry, I know you're going to push this on just real quickly, just because I want to tackle the second one really quickly. Roman, can I just ask you a question? You said you're 28 years old. That was a great point, by the way. What's the youngest you would do? Wait. While you're thinking about that, Rachel, what's the youngest you would date and the oldest you would date?
How come I don't get the older question?
Okay, older too.
I've dated older.
Would you date 6 years old?
No.
Okay, so tell us.
I don't have an exact number, but I do have a range. And the reason why I don't have an exact number is, in some senses, age is really just a number. But there are life stages and value systems that develop in different seasons, and there's a reality to it, right? As someone who's 28, right, finishing grad school, I'm in a much different mental place and emotional state too than I was in college. Not necessarily superior, but we develop different ways over time. I think youngest, I would say maybe 23-ish. Yeah, so I can't date someone in college, for example, just because of my life stage and where I'm going in life, right, currently.
Thanks for answering that. If you're a college student, if you're a 21-year-old girl, you could date a 26-year-old. Maybe. Maybe, depending on the guy. But just know that it's going to come with immense challenges. Because if he's working, all day he's working, and then when he's done working, he wants to relax. But, like, take his mind off of work. But you know what you're going to want to do? You're going to want to study. You're like, I have to study for this exam. But during the daytime when he's working, you know what you're going to want to do? Play. Like, can we have lunch? Can I just stop by work? So I think certain seasons, different life seasons, it creates difficult challenges. And it's not morally wrong per se, unless you're like, no, I'm not going to do it. But it's going to create some natural tensions that you just need to be aware of. It's a wisdom issue. Wait, just tell us the numbers.
1 down and like 7 up.
Can I say something about that though? And that's fine. I mean, everyone has their own numbers engaged. But speaking from personal experience, I was in a relationship before where the life stage was different, and she was like 5-6 years younger. And one of the main things that she and I both agreed was a big tension point for us, and eventually was the primary reason why we broke up, was I'm in a place, as a 28-year-old, for example, right? Or I wasn't 28 then, but still 6 years older, where I was like, man, I'm looking to be married soon, right? So there's different expectations about what a dating relationship looks like when you're on a fast track or faster track to marriage. Whereas for her, it was more like, I'm just exploring the dating world. And so I just kind of want to have fun and be friends and be exclusive, but kind of just feel it out in that way. So those are completely different wavelengths. Neither is wrong, but they can't really harmonize.
I mean, I feel like you guys answered basically the second part. I mean, in terms of how old and how young can I date, we're going to actually come back to this question later on when we talk about when we're actually in a relationship. So let's hold off on this, but we're going to move on next, and I think this is an exciting one. We have this person in our sights. How do I approach them? As a guy, how does it look like when I biblically approach them? How should I even pursue after them as a man? And I think even nowadays, this question comes up a lot is, can a girl kind of pursue and go after a guy that they like? But we watch like Korean drama. You see like, oh, this guy is like doing everything for this girl. But we might want to flip that around and say, hey, can't I actually pursue after someone? Why do I always have to wait for the guy to pursue after me? Or even the guy too. Like, why do I have to wait for a girl to like me first? Can't I pursue? So I guess if you guys have any thoughts on that in terms of, is it okay? I mean, how does it look like biblically in terms of how a guy should approach a girl? And also, is it okay for a girl to approach a guy, and how does that look like? Actually, I pursue.
Why?
Why? Everything that they shared earlier. Values, boom, boom, everything. Enough about me, but I want to hear from you guys. I'll share later, but more from you guys.
I'd like to answer. Is it okay if we go out of order?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to answer the. Is it okay for a girl to initiate a relationship? I would answer no, and the reason why I would say no is because for a girl to initiate it, there's going to be a point in your relationship, or even when you want to get married, where you want your man to be the leader of your family, the leader of your children. And I think once it starts off where you initiate the relationship, I think it's very tricky to go backwards. But at the same time, I think it's okay for girls to drop hints. If a guy doesn't know you're interested, what is he gonna do?
So how did you drop hints like that?
What are some hints?
I think I was the one who, wait, hold on. I think I was the one who set up the second date. Because it wasn't like, hey, do you want to go on a second date? It was like, hey, are you free Thursday night? And were you say something?
Yeah, but that's a second date. So I guess my question is, how do you drop hints when it's not, there has been 0 dates?
Okay, okay, so, I think, oh, okay, I get what you're saying. So we met on Coffee Meets Bagel. So there was no initial, interaction beforehand. But if it wasn't through, Coffee Meets Bagel, I think one of the ways to initiate or even to show someone that you're interested is to be interested in what they're interested in. So if someone's even if someone's doing homework, right? And you're like, oh, he's cute, right? Or whatever, I don't know what goes through your head. But then, and they're studying for a test, you can ask them afterwards, oh, how was your test? I remember, you were saying you were studying, and show that you're interested in them, not just saying hey, doing all this, you don't need to do that, just be very, organic about it, I feel like. Yeah.
Now I want to ask a question on top of that. I think if you look at present-day society right now, I think there's a big push to say women can take charge, women can lead. How do you go about that in terms of, what if you see a guy that says, oh, I want to be a stay-at-home dad. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with is that, now that's a common theme that's brought up. Is that even biblical in the first place? And how do you address that?
I think if you know my personality, I'm very women strong. I believe that women can do, a lot of things that men think that we can't do. And at the same time, there is a limit. And I think that was really hard for me to understand. And it was hard for me to understand in the church setting as well. I didn't understand why people preached on the verses where women had to submit to men. I think that was a really hard topic for me to understand. But I think, I learned that even here at Living Hope, and why that's so important. And I think, what was the second part of your question? Sorry. Do you remember?
So again, the first part was, with our society,
Yeah.
they're pushing for women to kind of take charge and lead.
Stay-at-home.
Yeah, and is that okay? And even in a Christian context, how does that even look like?
I think my opinion on that is I don't think that there's a problem having that kind of role switch. So if I was able to make enough for our family and he could take care of our kids, I would love that. Because I think he'd be such a great role model for our future kids. And I think that I trust him enough to do that, and I have no problem in that sense taking that kind of role. But on topics that come up in our family about how to raise our kids, how much church is important to us, I think that should come from him. He should lead that in that way.
As much as I love what she just said, that like she could trust me being like the stay-at-home dad, I think a part of me wants to provide for her as a man. And so that's something to really think about when you are, you know, thinking about these things, right? Like roles, leadership, what that looks like. I think a lot of the guys who went to the men's retreat, we learned that, you know, leadership is the man's role, right? And so there were things that we learned about, but I think one of the things that is really important is that desire to be able to provide for my family, to be able to protect them, to safeguard them. And so I love you for that, but that's what I think.
You know, just practically, guys, be clear, and remember, be clear and courageous. The worst thing that she can say is, no. That's it. And you know, like, I think one of the reasons why, especially in the church, Margie, I really appreciate you sharing about like the difficulty of the submission idea. I think one of the reasons why we've made it difficult for women is because we have failed. So many men have failed to walk into their like sacrificial, loving leadership. And I think that's why, that's part of the reason why the women are like, submit to that, why? You know, and so I think if you're a dude and if there's a girl that you're interested in, and you just kind of feel like, man, I feel like maybe this is a good season, that she seems like she's thriving in the Lord, and you're kind of interested, and your cell group leader or whatever gives you the green light and the thumbs up, and just be like, look, I think I like you. I'd love to take you out for coffee, and maybe we can get married afterwards. No, just be clear and just be courageous. So someone in here, you have been asking for months, should I do this? Just ask her. Seriously.
Yeah, sorry, for the sake of time, we're going to continue on. Guys, we have we're filled with questions here. We want to try to get through as much as possible. So we're going to go into our next topic.
The person you're in a relationship with, they should ultimately make you better. So, brain fart. Basically, like, yeah, they should make you better in terms of they should be encouraging you, edifying you, loving you, but they should also be rebuking you in ways that you need to be rebuked. So I think based on like personal experience, I've been in like a dating relationship where this person like didn't encourage me, he just didn't make me a better person overall. He didn't push me, he didn't challenge me. If anything, he let me be comfortable. But in a dating relationship, you're ultimately trying to help each other become better for Christ, ultimately, becoming more shaped for Christ. So I think that if this person isn't doing that for you, then yeah, I think that's one sign of, yeah.
I think comfortable is bad, but safe, I think is good. So, in being in a relationship where you feel safe, where you feel like there's trust, and other signs could be, if I feel guilty ending the relationship, that could be a sign of unhealthy relationship. If there's just like, symptoms of like sickness, like you constantly arguing, or there's just a lot of tension. But kind of like answering the other questions if I can. So like, I think you can determine the health of a relationship as you take yourself outside of the bubble, right? So because relationship is perfect when you're on your honeymoon, and even in like The Bachelor, it's like, of course, everyone's going to be in love if you have good food and, all these new experiences. You take them out into the real world, and then your relationship gets tested, and you find out we don't have a strong foundation at all. And so to I think, gauge the health of a relationship, I think it's good to like go out and not just you two. So like in terms of like the frequency, I knew Paul and I were compatible and we were healthy when like I took him, he spent time with my family and I saw him in that context. And I saw the way he treated my parents and I saw the way he treated my brother. Like I knew this was a good and healthy relationship. We went to church together. I saw that our relationship still was compatible because we could pray together, talk together, serve together, so it was healthy. So, you know, taking yourself outside instead of just like every day, just you two on a date, because of course everything's always going to be peachy keen during those times, but it's like when you hang out with other friends, or it really just shows you, okay, what is the state of your relationship and condition.
Quick questions about bounce off of that. You talked about you should feel safe and you should build that trust. How do we improve that trust in that relationship? Like if there were people in a relationship, if you don't feel that safety and that trust, how do you build that? How do you work to build that trust and that safety?
So trust is built with faithful acts over time. So how do you build trust? Of course, in our relationships, of course, there were moments where trust was broken. That didn't mean that I ended the relationship. We talked about it. I told him how I felt about the situation, and we tried to reconcile. And vice versa, you know. And so if there was change, then trust was built. My trust for him did increase, but there has to be change.
And then a second question, I think this is open to everyone, is Jenny talked about the frequency of how much time we spend together. But let's go the other way. What if you don't spend a lot of time? You spend a lot of time with your friends. You know, I think this tackles our third question. You know, how do I walk in a dating relationship with the intent of marriage without being so emotionally attached with my boyfriend or girlfriend and so wrapped up with that idea of marriage? I think a lot of us want practical advice. So practically, how much time should I spend with my boyfriend or girlfriend? How much, you know, what should we be doing, and all these other things. So if any of you guys can elaborate and talk about that.
You know, it really depends on who you are. Some of us, we are more emotionally hardwired than other people. Some of us, I mean, you will watch like a Marvel movie and you're like ready to go off to war. Others of us, we could spend all day with our boyfriend and we still think he's an idiot, not attracted to him, you know? And so it really depends on who you are. But I think that's where you have to be honest about who you are. But also, if I could add this too, it's not just about who you are, it's about when you're together. For example, some of us, we're totally fine until nighttime. And that's when all the dangerous and unhealthy and bad stuff happens. And so we need to be cognizant of those times. There are certain times when your relationship that's when you should hang out. And there are other times when you know, like if we hang out at these slots of the day, unhealth is going to be created. So you have to know yourself.
I mean, it answered everything that we were just talking about in terms of even how do you build this trust. And there was no trust or safety you built through that relationship. You know, Johnny, if you could go to the next slide, I think these are the questions that you guys posted. And it goes really deep. And, you know, and I think in Marty's situation, she shared that she got out of the relationship. Now, what about those who have already committed a sexual sin? You know, is it wiser to end the relationship? Or, you know, can the relationship still be redeemed? And, you know, even along this topic, you know, I want to open this up to all of you. You know, how far can you even go in a relationship? You know, if we just don't have sex and we do everything besides sex, is that okay? So, you know, I know it's a very broad question and it's a very heavy topic, but I think it's a topic that we need to discuss in terms of, I mean, because like Marty shared, this might be happening within the church, within people that are serving within the church. So, if anyone wants to open up that.
Just one verse that comes to mind, kind of related to this area, is Ephesians. It says, "But among you there must not be a hint of sex." This is a hint, but it's a real high standard. That's what Scripture says. There must not be a hint of sexual immorality or greed or any kind of impurity, because these are improper for God's holy people. So, right now, I'm sure you guys will all agree with me that we live in a very evil world. Where there's a lot of potential sins. You have to be very careful. And I think if you're going to start dating, it's kind of going back to the beginning, but if you're going to start dating, you should really start out with a game plan. You don't have a game plan and set the parameters up front, you're gonna miss it. And if you're in a situation where there's an area that you shouldn't be, I think you should definitely not only resist and all that, but you should go to your pastor, go to an older brother, older sister, a mature Christian, and just explore, just kind of share, and have people involved in the situation.
Can I say something? I think those are great points. On the point of going to a pastor, going to a mature Christian, accountability is only effective if you give an account, right? If you're only going to people to share what you have struggled with or made mistakes in, and they just hear you out, that's not accountability. You have to have the humility to be told you are wrong. You have to have the humility to be corrected, even if you don't want to do it. That's true accountability. Also talking about game plan, yeah, I mean, the responsibility is on the guy and the girl, for sure. But speaking to the guys, if your girlfriend is the one that has to keep saying no and drawing the line and saying, let's not go any further, you've lost your leadership. And she won't respect you in your other decisions. Because how can she? Right? Going to the point of battling the sexual sin and things like that, sex is so much more than physical. I think even if you ask people who are married, right, they would tell you emotional intimacy is what drives it, right? And so I think in the dating relationship or whatnot, you don't just look at your girlfriend or boyfriend and on day one say, I just want to sleep with that person. That's not where it came from. There are emotional ties that are carried with that. So on that note, you have to guard in dating your emotional intimacy. I think it's actually easier to call it physical intimacy because we see it, it's an action. But emotional intimacy is a lot more subtle. You have to be very careful of how much of your heart you're giving to that person. And you have to respect your significant other. If they don't want to be as vulnerable emotionally, you have to respect that boundary. Also speaking, I mean, it's not just a guy issue, but as a guy to a guy, sex is not the step one of lusting. It starts with something smaller, right? A glance that was too long. Looking at something like pornography, masturbation, whatever it is. So you want to deal with sex, you have to deal with those things too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many of you guys were at the Purity Summit last year, but in terms of pornography, pornography actually, the more you see all these things, the more you start just planting within you, it just becomes an action. It will come out. So guys, and even girls, pornography is very dangerous. Pornography is actually very selfish. It's self-indulgence. I want to feel this way. I want this. And it goes back to what Bang said earlier. How much are you willing to give? It's not about the other person, it's about you. So yeah, I mean, thank you guys so much for sharing. Are you guys doing okay? I know this is a lot, but we're gonna move on due to time, but we do have 3 more sessions. We might run a little bit over time, but let's get through these last 3, okay? Now, if you go to the next slide. Now, spiritual roles. We always have this question where, in a church context, the man, what is his role? And the ladies, what are their roles? We hear this term a lot, submit. I think within the church, you hear, like Margie shared earlier, like, woman must submit to man. But what does that even mean? Do even men submit to women? What does that word mean? Again, and what is the role of a man in a relationship? What is the role of a woman in a relationship? You guys could expand on that. Thank you.
Well, it seems like biblically that the male is the initiator, right? Like the church does not save herself, Christ saves the church. It seems like females are actually wired in a lot of ways to be responders. Now, the tough thing is that in some ways, this does not take full manifestation because it's still, like in terms of full manifestation of the marriage. Because in dating, you're not fully married. However, the guy can still initiate and the girl can respond or kick his butt for not initiating. Okay? And maybe I can just try to distill this down even quicker. If you want to be more spiritual in your dating relationship, this is my #1 biggest recommendation. Don't start by doing joint devotionals. I think that's a mistake. You know what happens? Because they start to wire their own relationship with God with the relationship. But what you actually really need to do in a dating relationship is you need to pursue Jesus. And the other person needs to pursue Jesus. So if you want to get together afterwards and be like, hey, what did you learn from Jesus today? What did you learn from Jesus? That's different. But if the only times you're hanging out with God, or when you're hanging out with each other, what I would say is you're developing a strange codependency where your boundary with the dating partner and God, all of it's been blurred. And I think that's dangerous. And so if you're a guy, pursue Jesus and initiate conversations and ask specific questions. If you're a sister, pursue Jesus, and that'll put you in a better place to kick his butt if he's not initiating conversations.
But babe, going off of that, how do we know if the man is, if that man is spiritually ready to lead? If we don't have those, moments where he can share those egos and share those insightful thoughts of what we read. How would you?
If you don't know whether he does that or not, how do we know? Yeah, so I think that's where you can see other hints, right? Is he involved with the local church? Does he serve? Is he a man of character? Is he plugged into community? What do people who know him say about him? I think that you can get a lot of clues from that. So it always kind of baffles me when a girl dates some guy who never goes to church and she's like, I don't get why he's not leading me. Yeah, it's because he's not leading anyone. He's not even leading himself spiritually. And so that's where you have to observe his life. Okay, and I know we're not into don't judge. But there's two types of judge in the Bible, right? There's that sinful judge, but there's also I'm going to judge you based off of the accruing of all your life actions. Because then it's a fair judgment. It's an assessment. And so it's okay for you to assess other people. Is that too harsh?
No. And I'm going to go even one more step.
Thanks, Roman.
Yeah.
Thanks for answering.
I validated him, so we're good.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, my opinion means that. Don't expect the guy to become a leader if he's not right now. He's not going to change overnight and suddenly be the man of God that you want him to be. Don't lie to yourself. Don't do that.
I think before too, that's something that I wanted, right, is a man who could spiritually lead me. But I think my two markers were how much did you read the Bible and how much did you pray. Those were the only markers I marked off spirituality for. But being in a relationship, I learned that there are so many other ways where you are led by the Spirit. And one concrete example is that Paul leads me spiritually in his humility. Because in our relationship, he is so quick to say sorry and to forgive. And that is something, like Kim said, I literally die when I say I'm sorry. I feel like I'm literally it's my pride probably. Anyway, being in this relationship with him, he leads me in that way. So it doesn't have to be only strictly just Bible. Right. It's his gentleness.
No, just to add to what Jenny's saying, leadership is not the guy on the stage. It's not the guy who's that's not necessarily leadership. So some of us, I think we're in a dating relationship with a guy who might be more quiet, or he's not the life of the party, and we're like, I wish he'd be a leader. But yeah, if he's, as Jenny was saying, the initiating in terms of forgiveness, reconciliation, he's leading.
We're gonna move on. Now, this question I want to ask actually Ben, Jenny, Jay, and Bang. How do you know if this person is the one? And how did you come to that realization? And even Marty too. Sorry.
No, can't answer.
So how do you know that the person that you are in a relationship with is the one to marry? And even how do you even protect yourself in terms of, what are some good thoughts to have in terms of marriage? Is it okay to think about things that you will do when you're married? Or should we focus more on the present right now and what's going on and finding out if this person is really the one? So if you guys can kind of expand on that.
Okay, so I think for me, just real quick, like I've dated, in the past before Margie, and through that, I've experienced, what made me become who I was when I met Margie, and a lot of the things that we talked about today, like a huge thing for me was values, right? What things do I value? And I knew going into the relationship that I was looking for someone who valued the same things. And so I think straight up, it was like, I value this, and what do you think about it? And she's like, yes. And I was like, yes. But I think just over time, you start to see, for me, just for us or for me personally, I think one thing that I saw in Margie was just her heart. When I talk to her about things, when I see how she reacts to something, whether it's like a bad incident or dogs, like there was something that I saw in her that just shouted like that she was genuine. And another thing that really made me think like, man, like I gotta hold on to her is how much how she viewed the Lord and how much she wanted to continue learning about God. And I think like, it's crazy because it's not like a moment, like it's not like she's the one. Like it's like, man, you're walking on this path with this person and you're like, man, I like it. And you're like, I want to keep doing this, and I think there are things that you have to do. Like I think it's good to step out of the box, like get out of the bubble, to make sure, like, hey, is this healthy? Am I, glorifying God through my relationship? Things like that. You look at that and then kind of just flows with, oh man, I'm just getting really, and sorry, but yeah, I think for me, that's what it was. Sorry, yeah, that's.
Maybe from this side, just one more person.
As I think back, I was in a very blessed, very great circumstance, because I think one thing for sure is I was a beneficiary of a lot of prayer. To be honest with you, I remember like when I was junior high, my grandfather was trying to set me up with this pastor's wife. This praying pastor's daughter or something like that. So I remember him just saying, "Jaga" in Korean, "Jaga," I'm praying for. He was really praying for me. And same thing with my father, my parents. He, really stressed getting married early. Put pressure, but he really prayed, really. So overall, I was a beneficiary of prayer. But for me, though, I was able to know my wife in a very I just got to know her as a person just serving at the church together. And I just saw her faithfulness, her character, her love for people. And through that, that's what attracted me.
Jenny, I want to direct this question to you, because you do work with a lot of relationships. It goes with this last question. At what point should we stop trying to make things work and give up the relationship? Because I think we have a very weird. I think we have a very weird understanding of what commitment is. I think because we're committed, even if things fall apart, we're still going to stay committed. But is that really what commitment means? And how do we tackle it?
I think that's it's a good trait to develop in your dating relationship is, learning how to be selfless and to sacrifice. And this quote on the screen here, the last one was like, back in my day, if something was broken, we would fix it and not throw it away. I love this quote, but in the context of marriage. And the reason why is because in marriage, there's a covenant, there's an ownership. And so, I don't know, it's like, I use examples, but it's like, if you're walking down the street and you see something broken, you're not gonna stop and fix it because it's not yours. And so in the same way, like dating, yes, absolutely, there's a commitment, but there is you're free to end the relationship. And so the red flags, I would say, is, well, how do you know the difference between when it's time to stop? And that takes wisdom, and that's why I think prayer is important. I think that's why having other people speak into your life is important.
Now, relationships, like especially in the church, you're surrounded by people. Now we're going to go into our second to last topic in terms of the couple and others. Now, it says this: I'm not the best of friends with someone in our ministry because of who they date. Is it okay for me to feel this way? What do you do about somebody that doesn't realize that they're interfering with the relationship? This person thinks that it's okay to do whatever they want with someone, but I see that as a major hindrance to the actual relationship. So I think that question is more like, you see someone in a relationship and they're spending a lot of time with other people, and this person's constantly spending time with this person. Is that causing a hindrance to that relationship? And I think these last two questions are huge in terms of what do you do when your community doesn't support the relationship you're in, and what do you do when even your parents don't support the relationship? Do you just drop the ball and run, or And look. In the Bible, I think we use this a lot. In the Bible, we say it tells us to obey our parents. So what does that even like? If we are so captivated by this person, and the parents are not for it, I know this is a lot. Anyone can kind of talk about it.
I wanted to go into the first question. I think it's okay to. Sorry, I'm trying to read the question. I'm not the best friend with someone in our ministry. I don't think you have to be best friends with everyone. I think it's okay if in that circumstance, I think it depends on the circumstance. I think that applies to like every question that we've answered today. But if it's because it makes you uncomfortable, I think I understand that. But also, I want to say that it shouldn't affect the ministry. And it shouldn't affect how you are at church. Because I think that goes into a very unhealthy way of going about it. I don't think you need to be best friends with everyone in your ministry. But I think it's important to be still a body of Christ, if that makes sense. And I also want... so the second question, what do you do about someone that doesn't realize that they're interfering with the relationship? I want to speak to the person that is interfering and also the person who is observing that. There should be a very big boundary set between a couple and people that are not part of the couple. And for Ben, he's involved in a lot of different ministries, and that comes with other females. And if I had to think that every time he had to talk to another girl, it was flirtatious, or if it was, damaging our relationship, I think that would break us. And I think that there's a point that you also have to trust the other person and give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's something that I've had to work on personally. And if they don't realize it, the people that need to talk about it are the couple. So you need to approach your significant other and bring that up. And there should be the same standard for both set of people. So if I say like, you know, I don't like, or I get uncomfortable if you like touch someone else's arm, another like the opposite gender. You shouldn't be touching someone else's arm either. And I think that standard should be set. And the people, did I say both stances already? Did I? I think I did. Yes? Okay.
Could I answer the last two?
Yes.
Yeah. So community and parents, I'm going to kind of lump them together, although they're very different. But I would check the source. So if the people that are saying these things are the people that you respect, and do they care about you? So are they reliable? Second, what are they saying? What's their opinion, right? And is that biblical? And third, are what they're saying reliable in the sense, have they gotten to know your partner? And so the example I can give is, my parents were not very enthusiastic about my relationship with Paul, because from what they knew, he was a PT and the son of a pastor. And they didn't know what a PT was. They thought it was like enthused and, oh, pastor's son, like, does that mean I'm going to be a missionary? They just had all these wild thoughts, and they said, anyways, he's not good for you. But I knew if they got to know him, they would think differently. So I didn't break the relationship over there. I got a lot of pressure to do that. But it was until he came along on a family trip with us where my parents got to know him and they changed their mind. So it's like, yeah. Check the source, what are they saying? And it's like what they're saying based on their interactions with them, right? And if all those things are in place and they still say, hey, I still have some great concerns, it would be wise. It would be wise for you to